The lights in the studio were too bright, but Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She sat down across from Piers Morgan like a woman who knew exactly where the conversation was headed. Piers adjusted his cufflinks, smirked faintly, and leaned in with the confidence of someone used to cornering guests. "This should be interesting," he said with that patented British flair, his tone a cocktail of sarcasm and certainty. Jasmine simply raised an eyebrow. "Only if you're ready for real answers." The producers gave the countdown. 3, 2. And then the red light came on. "Congresswoman Crockett," Piers began, "you've been accused of using identity politics as a shield. Isn't it just an excuse to avoid real policy conversations?" She didn't blink. "Is it identity politics to speak on behalf of people who are never in the room, or is it just uncomfortable to hear the truth in an accent you can't ignore?" Piers tried to interject, but she kept going. "You want to talk about policy? Let's talk about housing inequity, about the maternal mortality crisis for black women in America, about voter suppression. Or would you rather debate tone and titles?" The camera zoomed in. The control room went silent. "You've made a career of interrupting strong women and calling it journalism," Jasmine added, voice calm but cutting. "But here's what I won't let you do: reduce lived experience to a soundbite." Piers cleared his throat. His smirk faded. Jasmine leaned slightly forward, eyes locked. "You asked me here for my voice. Now listen." The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was heavy. Intentional. Like the moment just before a truth lands. And in that moment, it was clear, this wasn't going to be the interview Piers expected. Piers shifted in his chair. For the first time, his trademark composure cracked, just slightly. The crew behind the cameras exchanged quick glances. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just answered his question. She'd flipped the power dynamic in the room like a switch. "Congresswoman," Piers said, attempting to regain footing, "surely you don't mean to imply that criticizing policy is racist?" Jasmine tilted her head, her smile unwavering but sharpened. "What I'm implying is that when certain communities advocate for survival, folks like you call it divisive. But when others demand dominance, it's called patriotism." Piers blinked. The silence stretched. He wasn't used to a guest wielding words like that, sharp, deliberate, factual. "You see," Jasmine continued, "what bothers you isn't that we're talking about race or power. It's that we're not asking for permission anymore." Piers tried to pivot. "But what about personal responsibility? Doesn't the black community need to?" "That's where you lose all credibility," Jasmine snapped, leaning in. "You don't ask poor white communities to apologize for Appalachia. You don't ask Wall Street to apologize for 2008. But you demand that black America take full responsibility for a system it didn't design and can't escape." Her voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. It was precise. Unapologetic. And piercing. Piers' lips parted like he might speak, but no words came. "Let me make this plain," Jasmine said. "You invited me here thinking you'd educate me. But I came to remind you, you don't get to sit across from a black woman in Congress and pretend the empire you glorify didn't build its legacy on people who look like me." Piers looked at the camera, then back at her. He opened his mouth again. She beat him to it. "And don't ask me if that's divisive," she said. "Truth always feels divisive to people committed to comfort." The air in the studio had changed. And Piers Morgan, for once, had nothing to say. Piers leaned back, visibly rattled. He tapped his notes, searching for stable ground, something he could use to steer the conversation back into his familiar zone of snide control. But Jasmine wasn't giving him that chance. "Let's talk about your own country," she said, her voice still even, "because your interviews always come with this colonial lens. Like America's flaws are somehow isolated. Let's not forget, the empire you were born into wrote the handbook on oppression." Piers scoffed. "This isn't about the UK. No, Jasmine interrupted, but it's about the arrogance that comes from pretending your hands are clean while pointing at our scars. The audience watching from behind the glass pane leaned in. Even the producers stopped whispering through their headsets. You think you're challenging me, she continued, but what you're really doing is trying to shrink the conversation down to something safe. Something you can handle. But I'm not here to be handled. Piers tried again. You represent a deeply divided country. Doesn't some of that fall on people like you? The rhetoric? The partisanship? Jasmine paused. America's divided because people like me finally have microphones, she said. And people like you don't like what we're saying into them. Her delivery wasn't loud, but it rang louder than any shout. Piers shifted in his seat again, but Jasmine didn't stop. You can't interrogate black voices and expect us to play by your rules anymore. You want civility when the truth is uncomfortable. But where was that civility when George Floyd cried for his mother? When Breonna Taylor never made it to mourning? When Roe v. Wade got shredded and you called it a victory for reason? Her eyes didn't leave his. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to name what you've conveniently left out of every conversation like this. And today, I'm the one holding the pen. Piers froze. The pen wasn't mightier than the sword. Jasmine had proven, it was the sword. Piers' lips curled into the faintest smile, a lifeline. Congresswoman Crockett, you seem very passionate. But don't you think there's a risk when leaders use identity as a weapon? Jasmine didn't blink. What you call a weapon, I call a mirror, she shot back. And if the reflection unsettles you, maybe it's time to stop blaming the mirror. The studio had fallen into complete stillness. Even the camera operator paused his routine pan. Piers leaned forward, attempting that signature Morgan maneuver, lowered tone, faux intimacy. But if everyone is always a victim, who's left to be accountable? Jasmine cocked her head, now fully in command of the space. That's rich coming from someone who's never had to survive a system built to erase him. She let the words settle. I don't speak for pity, Piers. I speak for clarity. We're not asking to be lifted, we're demanding you take your boot off our necks. That's not identity politics. That's justice. For a moment, even Piers seemed unsure if this was still an interview, or a reckoning. Jasmine continued, her voice low, deliberate. You bring people on this show to entertain debate, but you mistake noise for substance. What you weren't prepared for today was someone who came with receipts instead of reactions. She reached into her folder and pulled out a page. According to your own past interviews, you said systemic racism was a myth. Here's the DOJ's data. You said critical race theory was brainwashing. Here's the curriculum you clearly haven't read. You said police brutality is exaggerated. Tell that to Tamir Rice's mother. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You came with ego. I came with evidence. Piers glanced toward his producers. He needed an exit. But Jasmine wasn't done. You can edit this segment however you like. But remember, clips go viral. And your legacy? That's not in your hands anymore. The silence was deafening. And Jasmine? She didn't even flinch. The producers were frozen behind the glass. No signals. No commercial break. Piers had always controlled the pacing, until now. Jasmine sat perfectly still, eyes locked on him. She wasn't waiting for a question. She was waiting for accountability. Piers cleared his throat. So you're saying everything I've done on this show, all my interviews, are invalid? Jasmine raised an eyebrow. I'm saying they've been comfortable. And comfort doesn't equal truth. The words hit harder than any headline. I've watched you bring on activists, professors, survivors, and instead of listening, you try to out-talk them. That's not journalism. That's performance. Piers opened his mouth, but Jasmine kept going. You once said George Floyd's death wasn't about race. You said America was just overreacting. But your reaction now, this silence, is the clearest proof of your misunderstanding. She leaned forward, not in aggression, but in defiance. Let me tell you what you've underestimated, Piers. You thought I'd come here and shrink into your format. But I don't fit into colonial framing. I'm not here for polite sparring. I'm here to dismantle the stage. Piers tried to cut in, but Jasmine was on fire now. This isn't about right or left. It's about who gets to speak and who always gets interrupted. And today, I'm not being interrupted. Camera 1 zoomed in. Her face was calm. Her tone, surgical. You want ratings? Congratulations. This moment will trend. But not because of your name. Because the truth finally spoke without apology. She stood. Piers fumbled for composure. We still have more time. No, Jasmine replied. You had time. Years of it. And all you did was talk over people like me. She turned to the camera. Let this be a message. We're not asking anymore. We're telling. Loudly. Clearly. And without permission. She walked off set. And for once, Piers Morgan had nothing left to say. The clip hit the internet like wildfire. Within 30 minutes, Jasmine's takedown had already racked up hundreds of thousands of views. By midnight, it was trending across every major platform. She walked off like a queen, one user posted. She didn't destroy him, she surgically erased him, wrote another. News anchors scrambled. Pundits were divided. But the people? They were unified. The moment wasn't about ego. It was about reclaiming truth on a platform that had so often twisted it. Meanwhile, Piers Morgan sat in his green room, unusually quiet. His team hovered nervously. One assistant offered to spin it, maybe release a statement, frame it as a bold debate. Piers waved him off. For the first time in a long career built on provocation, he'd been on the receiving end of clarity. And it stung. Across the country, Jasmine Crockett wasn't celebrating. She was strategizing. Because for her, this wasn't a viral victory, it was a declaration of war against the comfort of lies. She met that evening with a small circle of activists, attorneys, and reporters. This isn't about Piers, she said firmly. He's just the symptom. The disease is the machinery that lets voices like his define the national conversation. A young journalist asked, "What do we do next?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. We stay loud. We stay factual. And we stay dangerous to their comfort. One of the activists pulled up the clip on a phone. The room watched again in silence as Jasmine stared Piers down, listed receipts, and walked away without raising her voice once. Someone whispered, "That's what justice looks like." Jasmine looked up. No. That's what unapologetic truth sounds like. The room nodded. The fire wasn't in the clip. It was in the movement that clip had just ignited. The morning after, breakfast news shows were stuck between admiration and panic. Some anchors tried to downplay it, tense exchange, they called it. Others couldn't hide their awe. But none could ignore it. Jasmine Crockett had changed the rules. Piers Morgan, meanwhile, released a statement. Or rather, a damage control note masked as professionalism. I welcome passionate debate on my platform. Sometimes tensions rise. I respect Jasmine Crockett's perspective, even if I disagree. It was hollow. Everyone saw it. On social media, a new trend was born, #PiersGotCrockett. But Jasmine wasn't online celebrating. She was in Atlanta, walking into a university auditorium filled with students, activists, and legal scholars. They didn't rise when she entered. They erupted. Phones shot up. Applause thundered through the room. But Jasmine, unfazed, waved once and stepped to the mic. "I'm not a celebrity. I'm a servant. And that clip you saw wasn't a performance, it was a line in the sand." She let the silence sit. Piers Morgan represents something bigger than himself. A culture of confident ignorance. A platform that rewards provocation, not perspective. And every time we let it slide, we lose. She stepped down from the podium and walked among the students. "I want you to ask yourselves, when's the last time you watched a black woman speak without interruption? Not perform. Speak. Not entertain. Educate. Not soften her tone. Sharpen it." The room was electric. She stopped in front of a law student who asked, "What would you say to young black women watching that interview who feel afraid to speak up?" Jasmine smiled, firm. "Your voice is a weapon. But only if you use it." The student teared up. Jasmine put a hand on her shoulder. "Never ask for permission to be brilliant. Especially from men who've built careers pretending they know more than you." The auditorium roared. And outside, cameras waited, not to catch her fall, but to witness the rise of something far more powerful. By midday, it wasn't just a trending clip, it was a flashpoint. National publications picked it apart. Editorials questioned whether Crockett had gone too far. Conservative outlets cried foul, calling it a disrespectful ambush. But the loudest voice wasn't on TV or in print. It was in the streets. Across campuses and courthouses, protest signs began appearing. "Listen when black women speak. Facts aren't attacks." She brought receipts. He brought ego. And then came the debate invitation. A major news network reached out to Jasmine's team. "We'd like to host a televised roundtable. You and Piers. Civil discourse. Equal time." Her team hesitated. The optics were risky. But Jasmine? She barely blinked. "If they want round two," she said, "they better bring more than airtime and lights." The next evening, Jasmine appeared not on a flashy debate stage, but on her own terms, an independent live stream from a community center in Houston. She didn't wait for a rebuttal. She gave a lecture. "I won't debate my dignity. I won't explain my tone. What I will do is show you how dangerous selective outrage is. Because the real issue isn't how I said it. It's that I had the audacity to say it at all." The chat lit up with fire emojis, claps, and "say that." Meanwhile, on the other end, Piers Morgan recorded a rebuttal, overproduced, heavily edited, full of buzzwords like decency and respect. But the damage was done. The internet wasn't buying his narrative. One user wrote, "He talked about manners. She talked about justice. And Jasmine? She leaned into the storm, not away from it. Because when you shine light on ignorance, it doesn't burn the truth. It burns the mask off of power." The morning after her live stream, Jasmine was invited to the readout with Joy Reid. It wasn't just an interview, it was a celebration. Joy smiled as she introduced her guest, the woman who turned a pompous TV show into a masterclass in accountability. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. The crowd in the studio clapped before Jasmine even spoke. Joy leaned in, her tone playful but loaded. "Let's just get to it. What was going through your head when Piers started quoting statistics he clearly didn't understand?" Jasmine laughed, calm and cutting. "I thought, this man studied my bio just enough to mispronounce it." The audience burst out laughing. "But seriously," Jasmine continued, "I realized in real time, he wasn't there to listen. He was there to be loud. And I came to be clear." Joy's tone shifted, serious now. "You said something on your live stream, I won't debate my dignity." That hit home. Jasmine nodded. "Because they always want the performance. The palatable version. But when a black woman speaks with authority, not apology, they call it a meltdown. Joy leaned back, eyes narrowed. They want the truth quiet. Jasmine didn't blink. Well, I'm not built for silence. Social media lit up again. Clips from the interview spread like wildfire. She wasn't angry. She was articulate. Jasmine turned gaslighting into gasoline, and lit the room. Joy and Jasmine, this is the duo we didn't know we needed. In the green room afterward, Joy handed Jasmine a note scribbled in Sharpie. They tried to box you in. You burned the whole damn box. And Jasmine? She smiled, folded the note, and tucked it into her purse. Because this wasn't about one show or one man. This was about reclaiming the mic, and never giving it back. The final wave didn't come from Jasmine. It came from the people. A week after the interview, a crowd began to gather outside the very studio where Piers Morgan had tried, unsuccessfully, to corner her. They weren't holding torches. They held truth. Handmade signs read. Let her finish. Crockett clickbait. Ignorance doesn't age well. Jasmine didn't plan to show up. She didn't need to. But she did. Unannounced. Unscripted. Unbothered. Wearing a t-shirt that simply read, "Let Black Women Speak." The crowd erupted. A young student shouted, "You didn't just embarrass him, you educated all of us." A mother in tears said, "You made me proud to raise a daughter in this country." She stepped onto a makeshift platform, no teleprompter, no lights. "I'm not here to dunk on Piers," Jasmine began. "I'm here because the mic is finally in our hands. And I don't intend to drop it." Cheers. Applause. And something else, resolve. She continued, "This wasn't about one bad take or one loud voice. It was about a pattern. A system. A reflex to undermine women like me the moment we step into our truth." She pointed to the studio behind her. "That show had a script. But I came with receipts." The chant began organically, rolling through the street like thunder. RECAPTS. RECAPTS. And Jasmine? She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She stood still, like granite, like history being made in real time. Later, when reporters asked Piers for a response, he replied curtly, "I'll pass." Because in that moment, everyone knew. He already had. And Jasmine Crockett? She didn't need another round. She had already won the conversation, and rewritten the rules. When Jasmine Crockett walked into Piers Morgan's studio, she wasn't just stepping onto a set, she was stepping into history. He came armed with assumptions. She came armed with the truth. And when the lights dimmed, when the interruptions stopped, and when the smoke cleared, only one voice still echoed, hers. Jasmine didn't just challenge a host. She challenged a narrative. That black women must smile to be heard. That intelligence must be softened to be accepted. That truth must shrink to fit someone else's comfort zone. She shattered that script, on live TV. And in doing so, she reminded America of something we often forget. Real power doesn't shout. It stands. It speaks. And it stays. Jasmine Crockett stood for all of us who've been talked over, underestimated, or ignored. And she did it with poise, precision, and fire. So next time someone asks what justice looks like in a soundbite world, tell them it looks like this moment. Tell them it sounds like Jasmine.